Riya Sharma and Arjun Mehta seemed like the perfect couple to everyone who watched their wedding videos online. Smiles, celebrations, and promises of a bright future hid the growing cracks beneath the surface. Behind closed doors, Riya's laughter had faded into silence, and Arjun's charm had turned into suspicion and control. What began as a new life filled with hope in Canada quickly spiraled into isolation, secrets, and dangerous obsession. No one could have imagined that a hidden online account would shatter their world, turning love into a deadly tragedy that would shock families and communities alike. Before marriage, she had always believed that having her own money meant having her own voice. That belief stayed with her even after moving to Canada. As weeks passed in isolation, she began searching quietly for ways to earn without relying on her husband. She spent long hours online, scrolling through stories of women who had built secret independence behind closed doors. The idea felt risky, but the alternative felt like slowly disappearing. Late at night, when the house was silent, she created an anonymous online profile. She chose a name that had nothing to do with her real identity and avoided showing her face. At first, she told herself it was temporary, just a way to regain confidence. She controlled every detail carefully, believing privacy would protect her. The screen became a space where she felt seen without being judged directly. What surprised her was how quickly attention turned into income. Small payments gave her a sense of control she had lost. She used the money for personal items without asking permission and quietly saved the rest. Each transaction felt like proof that she still existed as an individual. Yet guilt followed closely behind. She feared what would happen if the truth ever surfaced, knowing her husband's strict beliefs left no room for secrets. Over time, managing the account became part of her routine. She balanced caution with curiosity, always aware of the risk. She never planned to expose herself fully or seek fame. For her, it was survival disguised as opportunity. The secret grew heavier with every passing day, but so did her dependence on it. What began as a quiet attempt at freedom slowly turned into a dangerous line she could not erase, unaware that digital footprints never truly disappear. After settling into her new life, she realized how completely her world had shrunk. Days were spent alone inside the house, with only routine chores to fill the hours. The independence she once had in India felt distant and unreachable. She was expected to ask before spending money, to explain every purchase, and to wait patiently for approval. Over time, this dependence began to feel suffocating. She wanted something that belonged only to her, something that could not be controlled or questioned. During long, silent evenings, she explored the internet more deeply. She read stories of women who earned privately through online platforms, hidden behind anonymity. The idea frightened her, yet also gave her hope. She convinced herself that as long as her face remained unseen and her identity protected, no harm could come from it. Slowly, she created a secret account using a false name and carefully chosen images that revealed little. Every step was taken with caution, as if she were walking on thin ice. At first, nothing happened. Then messages appeared, followed by small payments. Each notification felt unreal. The money was modest, but the emotional impact was powerful. For the first time since arriving in Canada, she felt in control of her own life. She used the earnings to buy personal items and quietly save the rest, imagining a future where she would not feel trapped. Yet fear never left her. She constantly checked her phone, worried someone might discover the truth. She erased browsing histories and guarded her devices closely. The secret became both her strength and her weakness. What she did not realize was that the freedom she found online was building a dangerous wall between her and the man she lived with, a wall that would soon collapse with devastating consequences. The change in her behavior did not go unnoticed. Over time, the husband sensed a shift in the atmosphere of the house. Small routines began to feel unfamiliar. She spent more time on her phone, often turning the screen away or locking it quickly when he entered the room. Meals were quieter, and the warmth he expected from marriage never fully appeared. Instead of seeing her loneliness, he interpreted distance as disrespect. Pressure from his own world added fuel to his frustration. Long work hours, financial responsibilities, and expectations from his community weighed heavily on him. He believed a wife should bring peace to a home, not questions. Any sign of independence felt like a challenge to his authority. He began watching her movements closely, measuring her silence and actions with suspicion rather than concern. The home slowly transformed into a place of tension. Simple moments were filled with unease. She sensed his growing irritation and became more careful, believing caution would keep her safe. Her secrecy increased, not because she wanted to deceive, but because fear had taken root. Each day felt like balancing on the edge of exposure. Trust, once fragile, began to disappear completely. He searched for signs of wrongdoing in ordinary behavior, convincing himself that something was being hidden. Instead of addressing the emotional distance, his thoughts turned inward, feeding anger and resentment. Control replaced communication. What could have been moments of understanding turned into silent observation. Both lived under the same roof, yet their lives moved in separate directions. The gap between them widened without words, driven by misunderstanding and power. Unseen to either of them, this growing tension was laying the foundation for a discovery that would shatter what little stability remained. Suspicion slowly turned into obsession. The husband began replaying every small detail in his mind, searching for meaning where none had existed before. A locked phone, a late-night screen glow, and unexplained confidence fed his belief that something serious was being hidden. He convinced himself that uncovering the truth was his right. The need to know became stronger than patience or restraint. One evening, when she was away from the room, he acted. He went through devices, accounts, and digital traces, moving with urgency rather than care. What he discovered felt unreal at first. Images, payments, and messages revealed a secret life he had never imagined. In his mind, the discovery was not about privacy or desperation, but betrayal. He felt humiliated, convinced that his honor had been publicly destroyed without his knowledge. Anger flooded every thought. He did not consider why she had done it or what loneliness had driven her there. Instead, he focused on how it reflected on him. The idea that others might have seen what he believed belonged only to him shattered his sense of control. Shame turned into rage, and rage demanded release. When she returned, the atmosphere in the house felt heavy and dangerous. The truth hung in the air, even without words. His thoughts were no longer rational. The discovery erased any remaining restraint he had. He saw the secret not as a mistake, but as an unforgivable act. At that moment, the balance of power he had tried to maintain tipped into something violent. The line between anger and cruelty disappeared. What began as digital curiosity ended as a trigger for destruction. The secret he uncovered did not bring clarity or closure. Instead, it opened the door to a tragedy that could no longer be stopped. That night unfolded in a way that could never be undone. The house, usually quiet, became the setting for uncontrolled anger. The tension that had been building for months finally exploded. What followed was sudden and brutal, driven by emotion rather than thought. The violence was not planned, but it was relentless. Each moment was fueled by rage, humiliation, and a desire to dominate rather than understand. The bride was caught completely unprepared. The space that was meant to protect her became a trap. There was no escape, no time to process what was happening. The attack continued until her body could no longer respond. When it finally stopped, the silence that followed felt heavier than the noise before it. A life filled with hopes, fears, and secrets ended in that moment. Outside, the neighborhood remained unaware. Lights stayed on, televisions played, and life continued as normal. Any unusual sound were dismissed as a private argument, something people chose not to question. Inside the house, reality had changed forever. The violence had crossed a line that could never be erased. When he finally stepped back, shock replaced anger. The consequences of his actions became impossible to ignore. The person he believed he controlled was no longer alive. What remained was fear and the weight of irreversible damage. The power he thought he had reclaimed turned hollow and meaningless. That night marked the point where everything ended and everything began at once. The secret, the anger, and the need for control had all led to this single outcome. By the time the house fell silent again, there was no return to normal. Only a body, a broken future, and a truth that would soon demand to be revealed. After the violence ended, panic took over. The house no longer felt like a home, but like a crime scene he did not know how to face. Fear of consequences pushed him into denial. He tried to convince himself that what had happened could somehow be explained away. The reality of a lost life was too heavy to accept, so he focused on hiding the truth instead. He cleaned what he could, rushing through the house with shaking hands. Objects were moved, marks were wiped, and broken things were discarded. Time felt distorted as he tried to erase evidence of the night. In his mind, every action was an attempt to regain control over a situation that had already slipped beyond repair. He delayed contacting anyone, hoping that confusion would work in his favor. When authorities were finally notified, his version of events sounded practiced but fragile. He described an accident, a sudden collapse, anything that could shift attention away from violence. However, his behavior raised questions. The delay, the inconsistencies, and the condition of the scene did not match his explanation. What he believed was a convincing story began to unravel almost immediately. Digital traces remained untouched. Financial records, online activity, and timelines quietly told a different story. The secret account he discovered was still there, along with signs of his own actions afterward. Technology preserved what he could not erase. Each attempt to hide the truth only added another layer of suspicion. By the time investigators began connecting the pieces, it became clear that the cover-up was as damaging as the act itself. What he thought was a chance to escape responsibility instead tightened the net around him. The silence he tried to protect became evidence, and the truth started pushing its way into the open. The investigation moved quickly once authorities began examining the details. What initially appeared uncertain soon revealed clear patterns of violence. Medical examinations showed injuries that could not be explained by an accident. The marks on her body told a story of repeated force over time, not a single tragic moment. Each finding pushed the case further away from the husband's claims and closer to a deliberate act. Forensic teams studied the house carefully. Signs of cleaning were obvious, but they only highlighted what was missing. Blood traces, damaged furniture, and disturbed areas pointed to a struggle that had been intentionally hidden. Investigators reconstructed the timeline, noting the long delay before emergency services were contacted. That delay raised serious questions about intent and responsibility. Digital evidence played a major role. Financial records revealed unexplained income that did not match the household's known earnings. Online activity uncovered the anonymous account, along with the time frame of its operation. Investigators understood that the account itself was not the crime, but it helped explain the motive behind the violence. The discovery showed how secrecy, control, and anger collided inside the home. As details became public, the case drew attention beyond the local community. Many were shocked by how quickly a private marital issue had turned fatal. Advocacy groups highlighted the warning signs that had been ignored, including isolation, financial control, and escalating suspicion. The story shifted from scandal to tragedy. With evidence stacking against him, the husband was taken into custody. The investigation revealed not just what happened, but why it happened. What looked like an ordinary immigrant household concealed a dangerous imbalance of power. By the time the case reached its final stage, the focus was no longer on secrets or shame, but on the irreversible loss of a life that should have been protected. The legal process that followed brought a heavy sense of finality. The husband faced charges that reflected the severity of his actions, and the case moved through the justice system with intense public attention. Evidence presented made it impossible to ignore the brutality involved. The focus remained on the violence, not on the private choices of the victim. Her life was reduced to facts and records, but the weight of her absence was felt in every detail. Her family in India learned the truth from a distance, through official calls and news reports. Grief crossed borders as they struggled to understand how a new beginning had ended so violently. Plans for visits and reunions were replaced with mourning. The promise of a better future that sent her abroad came back as unimaginable loss. Public discussion grew around issues that often remain hidden. Conversations about domestic abuse, control within marriages, and the isolation faced by immigrant women became louder. Many realized that danger does not always appear openly. Sometimes it grows quietly behind closed doors, disguised as tradition or authority. The house in Canada stood empty, marked by what had happened inside. It became a symbol of a life interrupted and dreams that would never return. The husband's future was sealed by his actions, defined forever by a moment of uncontrollable violence. In the end, the story was not about an online account or secrecy. It was about power, silence, and the cost of control. Her legacy lived on as a reminder that dignity and safety should never be compromised. The tragedy left behind a warning, urging others to see the signs before silence turns deadly.